What if the greatest secret in modern royal history wasn't buried in an archive, but locked inside a private safe belonging to the king himself? Palace insiders now claim that DNA results capable of shaking the very foundation of the monarchy, were deliberately hidden from the public. Tonight, we uncover what those results allegedly revealed, and why someone at the highest level wanted them to disappear. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The whispers did not begin in the press. They began in corridors where loyalty is currency and silence is survival. According to multiple anonymous palace sources, a sealed envelope marked confidential. Genetic review was placed inside a private safe in Charles's study, an area few are ever permitted to enter. The safe, they claim, was not symbolic. It was strategic. Accessible only to two long-serving aides whose devotion to the crown has never been publicly questioned. It became the silent guardian of something far more dangerous than scandal. It became the keeper of doubt. Those who spoke under strict anonymity described the atmosphere in the weeks leading up to the alleged test as tense, even brittle. Conversations reportedly stopped when certain names were mentioned. Family gatherings carried an undercurrent of calculation. And amid that emotional pressure, a decision was made, quietly, discreetly, to commission a DNA analysis. Not through official palace channels, not with public documentation, but through a private arrangement that ensured distance, deniability, and above all, control. This was not routine. This was containment. Rumors suggest the test was ordered during a period of intense internal strain, when questions surrounding lineage, resemblance, and long-held assumptions began circulating in private discussions. What started as speculation allegedly evolved into a need for certainty. For a monarchy built on bloodlines, certainty is not optional. It is everything. And yet, when the laboratory findings reportedly arrived, something shifted. Sources claim security protocols tightened almost overnight. Access to certain rooms was restricted. Staff schedules were quietly adjusted. It was subtle enough to avoid headlines, but significant enough for insiders to notice. And then there were the results themselves. No official statement, no acknowledgement, only the envelope, folded and placed behind steel and code. Whispers began suggesting that what the test revealed did not align with the story the public had accepted for years. That the findings were not catastrophic, but complicated. Complicated enough to create tremors beneath the polished surface of royal tradition. Complicated enough to make even the most composed monarch pause. If the alleged results are authentic, the implications reach far beyond personal revelation. They touch succession. They touch legitimacy. They touch the invisible thread that binds crown to heir. And that is precisely why the envelope remained locked away. Because sometimes the truth does not merely expose, it rearranges power itself. But to understand why DNA testing became necessary in the first place, we must rewind to the moment doubts first surfaced inside palace walls. Every royal crisis begins not with headlines, but with whispers. Long before the alleged DNA results were locked away, there were murmurs inside private corridors. Questions no one dared to ask publicly. Expressions exchanged during family gatherings. And one unexpected remark, overheard by a staff member, that may have triggered the chain of events leading to the secret test. Those whispers did not erupt overnight. They crept in slowly, threading themselves through polite conversations and carefully rehearsed appearances. It is said that a private disagreement between senior royals first cracked the surface. What began as a restrained exchange about legacy reportedly turned sharper, more personal. Words like authenticity and certainty were not shouted, but they lingered. And in a family where heritage defines destiny, even a subtle challenge to lineage carries explosive weight. Then came the comparisons. Harmless at first. Casual remarks about resemblance, about traits passed down through generations. But repetition has power. Insiders claim that certain observations were made one too many times, in one too many private settings. A tilt of the head, a familiar expression, or perhaps an unfamiliar one. The speculation was never formalized, never acknowledged in public. Yet it spread in silence, carried by glances and unfinished sentences. In a monarchy built on continuity, resemblance is reassurance. Doubt, however, is destabilizing. The tension reportedly reached a boiling point during a closed-door discussion that ended as abruptly as it began. Voices were raised, then lowered. A door shut firmly. No official statement followed. No public shift was visible. But those within the inner circle felt the atmosphere change. Conversations became cautious. Loyalties felt tested. Emotional strain began to surface in subtle ways. Missed calls, shortened meetings, prolonged silences that said more than confrontation ever could. At the center of it all stood a monarch increasingly preoccupied with one question. What if the foundation is not as solid as it appears? Legacy is not merely personal pride. It is history, duty, the unbroken thread that links past to future. According to those familiar with the situation, the uncertainty gnawed at him, not loudly, not dramatically, but persistently. The need for clarity grew stronger than the comfort of assumption. And beneath that need, some suggest, lay something even more human. Fear. Fear of being remembered as the king who ignored a shadow. Fear of presiding over a legacy built on unanswered doubt. Because when insecurity seeps into a dynasty, it does not remain private. It transforms into action. It demands resolution. What may have begun as an emotional dispute reportedly evolved into a calculated decision. Certainty would not be left to rumor. It would be tested. Quietly. Discreetly. Permanently. And when doubt enters a dynasty built on bloodlines, it demands proof. DNA testing within the royal family isn't routine, it's unthinkable. Yet sources suggest a private laboratory, bound by ironclad secrecy agreements, was quietly commissioned. No official records. No public disclosures. Just a discreet collection, a sealed chain of custody, and a result that would allegedly never see daylight. Why was this operation conducted in absolute silence? Because silence in this case was not caution. It was strategy. Insiders claim the palace deliberately avoided domestic institutions, fearing even the smallest trace of inquiry might trigger suspicion. Instead, an international laboratory was allegedly selected. Far from London, far from familiar networks, far from prying eyes. The message was clear: this was not a routine verification. This was damage control before damage had even occurred. The samples, according to those close to the matter, were obtained under the guise of routine medical evaluations. Nothing dramatic. Nothing alarming. A checkup here. A consultation there. Within the structured life of royalty, medical reviews are expected, almost invisible. That invisibility became the perfect cover. No press alerts. No official statements, just quiet coordination and careful timing. The collection was reportedly handled with clinical precision, sealed immediately, documented privately, and transferred through a tightly monitored chain of custody. Every step calculated, every movement controlled. But control has a cost. Those involved were allegedly required to sign strict non-disclosure agreements, documents that bound not only their actions, but their silence. Technicians, intermediaries, even logistical staff were warned of severe legal consequences should a word escape. This was not framed as optional discretion. It was absolute loyalty demanded in writing. And when secrecy is enforced so aggressively, it raises an uncomfortable question. What outcome were they preparing for? The findings did not return instantly. Days stretched into weeks. And during that waiting period, tension reportedly thickened within the inner circle. Advisors whispered about potential fallout. Some urged preparation for the worst-case scenario. Others insisted the test itself was precautionary, a mere reassurance exercise. Yet reassurance rarely requires offshore laboratories and legal barricades. Reassurance does not create anxiety. This did. When the report was finally completed, sources suggest it was not delivered electronically. It was printed, sealed, and transferred through private hands directly to the monarch. No intermediaries. No digital trail. The delay in presenting the findings reportedly heightened unease. What could be so sensitive that even trusted advisors were initially kept at a distance? Why was the information confined to such a small, controlled circle? Behind the palace gates, speculation intensified. Some believed the truth, whatever it was, would remain buried. Others feared the opposite, that the very act of testing signaled a fracture already too deep to conceal. And beneath it all lingered a sobering realization. If the results challenged accepted lineage, the stability of the crown itself could tremble. Because in a monarchy, blood is not just biological. It is political. It is symbolic. It is power. Someone, somewhere, clearly believed that truth carried the potential to destabilize everything. And that belief alone reveals how fragile certainty had become. When the envelope finally arrived, everything inside the palace shifted. According to palace insiders, the moment Charles read the results, silence fell across the room. One aide described his expression as devastated yet composed. Another claimed the document was folded carefully, then locked away without a word. What did those pages reveal that warranted such immediate concealment? Those who claim to have witnessed the aftermath say the shift was subtle but undeniable. The monarch did not shout. He did not react with visible outrage. Instead, there was stillness, a long pause that felt heavier than anger. The alleged findings pointed to a genetic discrepancy, small on paper, perhaps, but monumental in implication. In any other family, it might have been a private matter. In a dynasty built on inherited legitimacy, it was seismic. Sources suggest that in that quiet moment, history felt fragile. The king, a man who had waited a lifetime to ascend the throne, now faced a revelation that threatened the very narrative sustaining his reign. Devastation, they say, flickered across his face, but discipline quickly followed. Composure returned. The document was folded with precision, as though physical order might restore emotional balance. Then it was placed inside the safe, locked, contained, or so it seemed. Within hours, an urgent private meeting was convened. Not the ceremonial kind filled with formalities, but a strategic gathering of the most trusted advisors. No extended circle. No unnecessary presence. The alleged discrepancy was discussed in measured tones, yet beneath those tones lay fear. What would disclosure mean? Would it unravel succession? Would it fracture public trust? Or would silence prove even more dangerous? The possibility of transparency was reportedly raised briefly. Some argued that confronting the truth head-on could prevent speculation from spiraling. That honesty, though painful, might reinforce credibility. But the counter-argument was swift and chilling. Public acknowledgement could ignite constitutional uncertainty. It could embolden critics. It could create questions with no clear legal answers. And in a system governed as much by tradition as by statute, uncertainty is poison. The debate intensified behind closed doors. Advisors weighed risk against stability, legacy against reputation, personal truth against institutional survival. The monarch listened, observed, calculated. This was not simply about emotion, it was about continuity. And in that calculation, a decision was made. The findings would not be announced. Not now. Perhaps not ever. Yet beneath that decision lingered an unspoken truth: concealment carries its own cost. The weight of hidden knowledge does not fade. It presses. It isolates. It creates distance between public image and private reality. And those closest to the situation reportedly sensed that something fundamental had shifted. Confidence gave way to caution. Familiar routines began to feel rehearsed rather than natural. If the results confirmed what some had feared, then silence was not protection. It was postponement. Because secrets of this magnitude do not simply disappear. They circulate in whispers. They test loyalty. They tempt betrayal. And the longer they remain buried, the more explosive their eventual emergence becomes. Because secrets inside a monarchy never stay contained for long. When truth threatens tradition, loyalty fractures. Reports now suggest the royal inner circle split into two camps. Those who believe the Dina results should remain hidden to protect stability, and those who argued transparency was the only path forward. The debate wasn't just political, it was deeply personal. Inside the palace, the air reportedly shifted from shock to strategy. Senior advisors, guardians of protocol and precedent, warned of constitutional chaos. They spoke of ripple effects, of legal ambiguity, of parliamentary scrutiny, of a monarchy suddenly forced to defend its own foundation. Their argument was rooted in preservation. Stability above all else. Protect the institution. Protect the line. Protect the illusion of certainty that sustains public faith. To them, disclosure was not bravery. It was recklessness. But another voice began to rise within those private conversations. Younger members of the family, according to insiders, questioned whether silence was truly strength. They understood the modern world. They understood headlines, public sentiment, the speed at which information travels. Concealment, they argued, could corrode trust more deeply than revelation ever would. In their view, honesty was not surrender, it was survival. And that generational divide cut deeper than protocol. It exposed contrasting visions of what the monarchy should be. Behind closed doors, discussions reportedly grew emotional. This was not a sterile policy dispute. It was about identity, about belonging, about whether protecting the crown justified protecting a secret. Some conversations are said to have escalated into confrontations within private residences, where familial roles collided with royal duty. Loyalty was tested. Allegiances felt uncertain. Even those who agreed on silence began to question the cost of it. The fear of media discovery loomed like a storm cloud over every discussion. Advisors reportedly analyzed worst-case scenarios, anonymous tips, investigative journalists, unauthorized disclosures. They knew that if the story broke externally, the palace would lose control of the narrative entirely. And in a monarchy, control of narrative is power. Once lost, it is nearly impossible to reclaim. As pressure mounted, the unity that once defined the inner circle began to thin. Whispers became sharper. Trust, once assumed, required reassurance. And somewhere within that fragile environment, speculation began to surface. What if someone had already spoken? What if the existence of the safe, the envelope, the concealed findings, had quietly made its way beyond palace walls? Because in situations charged with secrecy and moral conflict, conviction can transform into defiance. Some insiders now suggest that a single individual, motivated by conscience, frustration, or fear, may have leaked the first hint of the hidden results. Not the details, not the content, just enough to ignite curiosity, just enough to suggest that something monumental was being kept from public view. And if that is true, it changes everything. Because once a secret leaves the room, it develops momentum. It finds ears. It finds voices. It finds headlines waiting to be written. And that leak may have been the beginning of the end. It started with a single anonymous message to a journalist. Ask about the safe. At first dismissed as rumor, the tip gained traction when corroborated by a second palace source. Suddenly, the unthinkable became headline material. The monarchy's most guarded secret was inching closer to exposure. What had once been contained within locked doors and coded conversations was now brushing against the outside world. The journalist who received that message did not publish immediately. Instead, questions were asked quietly. Phone calls were placed, sources were revisited, and then came confirmation, not of the contents, but of the existence. A private safe, restricted access, heightened security following a sealed delivery. That was enough to turn suspicion into investigation. Within days, the tone inside newsrooms shifted from curiosity to urgency. Editors sensed volatility. Legal teams were consulted. Draft headlines were prepared but held back, waiting for one more piece of proof. Meanwhile, inside the palace, alarms reportedly sounded. Not literal alarms, but strategic ones. Damage control protocols were quietly activated. Advisors scrambled to assess who might have spoken, what information had escaped, and how far it had traveled. Public appearances began to change in subtle but noticeable ways. Engagements were shortened. Smiles appeared measured. Responses to unrelated questions were tighter, more rehearsed. The monarch's schedule, once predictable, became fluid. And in the modern media landscape, even restraint becomes a statement. Cameras lingered longer. Commentators dissected tone, posture, timing. Body language experts filled airtime, suggesting tension behind composure. Each gesture was analyzed not for what it showed, but for what it concealed. Speculation intensified with every passing hour. If there was a safe, and if something significant had been locked inside it, what did that mean for the line of succession? Analysts began revisiting constitutional frameworks. Commentators debated hypothetical scenarios. Social media ignited with theories. For some, it was intrigue. For others, it was existential. Because the monarchy does not survive on ceremony alone. It survives on belief. Inside the palace, fear reportedly deepened. Not fear of the truth itself, but fear of losing control over how that truth would be interpreted. Once a narrative escapes official channels, it evolves unpredictably. Advisors understood this. They had seen scandals before. But this felt different. This was not about personal behavior or private conflict. This was about blood. About legitimacy. About the invisible thread that anchors crown to air. The question no one could answer was how much the press truly knew. Was it only the existence of the safe? Or had whispers of the genetic findings begun to circulate beyond the palace gates? Every delay increased pressure. Every silence amplified suspicion. And with each passing day, the possibility of public revelation moved from improbable to inevitable. Because if the contents of that envelope were exposed, the consequences would not unfold quietly. They would erupt. They would test laws, loyalty, and long-held assumptions. They would force a reckoning not just within the family but across the nation. But what exactly would happen if the results were made public? If the Dina findings challenge official lineage, the implications are staggering. Titles, succession order, and centuries of tradition could be questioned overnight. Constitutional scholars whisper of unprecedented scenarios, unwritten rules tested under global scrutiny. Behind every crown is a family bound not only by duty but by emotion. If the alleged Dina results are true, they represent more than a constitutional dilemma. They cut into identity, belonging, and personal history. Imagine discovering that your place in history may not be what you believed. The political consequences alone could redraw the map of monarchy. A reshuffling of succession is not merely a bureaucratic adjustment. It is an earthquake that shakes identity at its core. Names long spoken as inevitable heirs could suddenly become subjects of debate. Protocol books, written to preserve order, may offer little guidance in a scenario they were never designed to address. Legal gray areas would emerge instantly, forcing advisors and constitutional experts to interpret traditions that rely more on precedent than precision. And precedent, in this case, may not be enough. Public trust hangs in the balance. For generations, the monarchy has survived because people believed in its continuity. Stability is its currency. But if the bloodline itself becomes a question mark, belief begins to fracture. Some would demand transparency, insisting that truth strengthens institutions. Others would fear that even acknowledging uncertainty invites chaos. Institutional survival and moral accountability would collide in a battle with no easy victor. International reaction would amplify the tension. Allies would watch closely. Critics would seize opportunity. Headlines would frame the moment not as a private correction but as a global spectacle. In a world where perception moves faster than fact, the monarchy could find itself fighting narratives beyond its control. And yet, beneath the political theater lies something far more fragile. Because this is not only about titles and legal frameworks, it is about people. About sons, daughters, siblings confronting the possibility that their history may not be what they were taught. Emotional devastation does not respect rank. Imagine the weight of hearing that the story of your lineage, celebrated, defended, inherited, may be incomplete. Loyalty clashes with truth. Do you protect the crown, or do you protect your own identity? Private conversations, according to insiders, have reportedly been filled with disbelief and quiet anguish. Words chosen carefully. Pauses stretching longer than usual. The psychological impact of hidden secrets can be isolating, especially within roles already defined by scrutiny and expectation. Royal life often demands composure over vulnerability. But uncertainty pierces even the most disciplined exterior. The contrast is stark. Public success. Private suffering. Ceremonial confidence masking internal doubt. And somewhere within that tension lies a final, unavoidable choice. A decision that could preserve order or redefine it entirely. Stability may depend not on law, not on tradition, but on the courage or caution of a single individual. And now, all eyes turn to the one person who holds the key. The Dina results remain locked away, for now. But history shows that secrets buried in monarchy rarely stay buried forever. The king stands at a crossroads, protect tradition by maintaining silence, or confront the storm by revealing the truth. Either path could redefine his reign. Pressure is no longer confined to palace corridors. It presses from the outside now, through headlines, commentary panels, investigative threads, and relentless public curiosity. Media outlets circle patiently, sensing vulnerability. Insiders grow restless, aware that silence is becoming harder to defend. The longer the envelope remains hidden, the louder the speculation becomes. What began as a contained secret has evolved into a test of leadership. Advisors reportedly continue urging caution. They warn that one wrong move could ignite constitutional uncertainty, unsettle allies, and fracture public confidence. They speak in measured tones about stability, about precedent, about protecting the crown from irreversible damage. To them, time is an ally. Delay may dull interest, silence may exhaust the storm. But storms fueled by mystery rarely fade quietly, they gather strength. Outside palace walls, the hunger for clarity intensifies. Citizens do not simply crave gossip, they crave certainty. In a monarchy that survives on symbolism, transparency carries enormous weight. It signals integrity. It reassures the public that tradition is not a shield for concealment. Yet transparency is also risk. It opens doors that cannot be closed again. And once truth is spoken aloud, it cannot be rewritten. Some sources suggest a controlled disclosure strategy has been quietly drafted. A carefully timed statement. Limited details. Framed within constitutional reassurance. A narrative shaped before it shapes itself. It would be presented not as crisis, but as responsible stewardship. Not as exposure, but as accountability. The goal would be to manage impact rather than eliminate it. But even a controlled release carries unpredictability. Reactions cannot be scripted. And so the king remains at the center of an impossible equation. Reveal the findings and risk destabilizing the institution he has waited his entire life to lead. Conceal them, and risk being remembered as the monarch who chose silence over honesty. It is not merely a political decision, it is a deeply personal reckoning. Legacy versus truth. Stability versus integrity. Authority versus vulnerability. Meanwhile, one question continues to echo in whispers. Is the envelope still inside the safe? Or has it already been removed, reviewed again, perhaps even duplicated? Because once doubt enters the bloodstream of power, it refuses to remain still. It demands resolution. The world waits. Advisors calculate. The family endures. And somewhere within the palace a decision looms. One that could either preserve the illusion of certainty or shatter it forever. Because in a monarchy built on bloodlines, the truth is never just personal, it is power. And power, once shaken, changes everything. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.